And it cannot, in many instances, even use paid informants who may be members of the organization in order to get information on organizations that are not engaged in some criminal activity. But there's nothing that prevents it from going to anyone who is a member, an avowed member, anybody who's identified himself here, and asking for an interview and wanting to find out what's going on. And of course, they may just get the party line, but analysis of information allows you to take lots of information from many different people, put it together, synthesize it, and be able to figure out somewhere within all of the information where the truth lies. Can I make just one point that in response to one of the other questions that you asked about what would it take to destroy the militia or for the militia to evaporate? Nothing will satisfy some hardliners. I mean, no amount of government responsiveness to perceived public need would do that. But if you looked at sort of parallel organizations like the tax protester movement and so on, the sort of running war with the IRS about all of its various practices and so on, no doubt an attempt by the government to sort of correct the excesses or address the excesses, to be more responsive to the public need, will go a long way to sort of satisfying people who are in the mainstream, people who really are genuinely convinced that they need to assemble in order to protect themselves from what they see as an erosion of their rights. It would go a long way to satisfying them, but it would do nothing at all to satisfy those who might have been responsible for Oklahoma City bombing or the like.
Okay. As I understand it, Mr. Stewart, you do not support some of the lawbreakers represented by those who are filing liens against government officials, or the Freemen, for example, that type of militia movement. Is that true?
They are our worst enemies. They give us a bad name.
All right. We should probably keep separate here in this discussion that there are a larger group that are more moderate, and then there are fringe groups that are not supported by the majority militia members. Let me put the same question to you about what would cause the militias to go away. What would satisfy the militia people so they would no longer feel the need to band together and threaten people who are threatening the Constitution?
Well, I think if they stop passing all these laws that infringe upon our rights.
Like what?
President Clinton now is going to go over to Japan and hopefully, or he thinks he's going to sign some kind of treaty that's going to put all kinds of regulations on this country that will be so complicated, written by 200 lawyers, and none of us will understand it, but a lot of people are going to have a lot of problems and cost a lot of money, and some people are going to go to jail because of it. So I think if they just stop passing so many of these laws that infringe, and regulations that infringe on our rights.
Well, it's kind of a chicken and the egg argument. I mean, many of the laws have been passed. You look at the gun regulation, for example. The laws are passed because there isn't an ability to sort of identify what human beings are doing, in their organizations, and so the legislatures and executive branches say, well, the only way that we're going to be able to do this is we'll put such restrictions on the main weaponry of those organizations, lawful restrictions, so that we'll be able to at least ensure some controls over the sale and the transportation, the importation of firearms, and we'll have that predicate of a law violation that will allow us to sort of investigate. And I think we've seen in the last 10 years a proliferation of these laws dealing with firearms, certainly on the federal level, that are even maybe perhaps veiled attempts to get directly at the heart of the militias that are hell-bent on violence. For example, Title 18 of the United States Code has a provision that basically says that a person who has renounced his citizenship, this is not a person who's a convicted felon, that's also a restriction, but a person who has renounced citizenship cannot possess certain designated firearms. Why is that? Who would renounce citizenship? The Freemen, the Republic of Texas activists. What do? They renounce their American citizenship. They put themselves in the position of, in effect, being outlaws The predicate act is therefore there to enable law enforcement to be able to develop whatever it takes, applications for wiretap, search warrants, surveillance, all of the rest in order to attack the law violation. Not the group, that happens incidentally, but to attack the law violation.
Dr. Glazer, you look like you rolling your eyes over there.
No, just a couple of comments, Mr. Rusinello. It's not all that easy to renounce one's U.S. citizenship. The Montana Freemen, or whoever they are, can renounce it to kingdom come. But if a citizen is within the borders of the United States, he can call it from the tops of the mountains. The United States doesn't recognize the renunciation. You can appear before a consul general in a foreign nation and renounce your U.S. citizenship, and that's okay. But in the United States, they're still U.S. citizens no matter what they do. On the one comment on the assault weapon thing, there's one statement in Mr. Stewart's presentation that stands out, and it's of a piece with what my two colleagues had discussed. It stuck out like a sore thumb. They consider themselves, the California militias, they consider themselves to be exempt from assault weapons bans. I think all of you heard that. My question is, what other laws and activities do they consider themselves to be exempt from? It's the old business of power corrupts. In a real sense, I don't think that anything will make these hardcore organizations disappear because they consider themselves exempt from the sorts of things that regulate you and me.
There was another catchphrase too that was mentioned, and that was that we'll obey all constitutional laws. And who will decide that? I mean, the individual decides whether or not the law is really constitutional or not. If your attitude is that the Second Amendment really has a sort of absolutist rather than a qualified application, I mean, virtually anything that relates to gun control is going to be viewed as unconstitutional, so you're free to disregard them. We can't have that. That just sort of breeds not only mischief, but anarchy and chaos.
What do you say, Mr. Stewart?
We oppose to anarchy. We believe we should obey all the laws. But I wanted to say about that exemption of the assault rifle ban. The FBI made the mistake of arresting two of our people over in Tuolumne County near Sonora for possession, and they had charged them with felony possession of assault weapons, which is 2 SKS rifles. And so our legal department thought, this is great. This is a big opportunity because these kids are absolutely clean, no criminal record whatsoever, and we're going to go to court and prove that we're exempt. And so he prepared his case, and I guess they present something to the judge, that what our position is going to be, and the judge looked the whole thing over, and when they come to court, the judge ordered the sheriff to give them back their guns and dismiss the case. So we wanted to make a precedent, but we were outmaneuvered.
All right. I have another question for you from the audience. The refusal to pay federal income taxes was supported by the Posse Comitatus and other so-called militia or paramilitary groups. How does a militia member live and accept the benefits of U.S. government today and not feel they have to pay taxes?
Well, we don't accept tax protesters. That's not our business. That's not what we're into.
All right. Dr. Glazer, do you think the militias are a danger or just a nuisance?
No, as I said, I have no quarrel with any groups of people under our Constitution, Second Amendment, carrying arms if they wish and banding together. I narrowed my focus here quite deliberately, and I want to leave it at that. I have a real problem with them calling themselves the militia, and I want to leave it at that. I don't have a problem with any group of people, whether under arms or otherwise, assembling and not violating the law. I have no problem with that. I have a real problem with their hijacking that concept in the United States Constitution. And in effect, the obverse side of that coin is they'll eventually deconstruct the United States Constitution themselves if they continue in that direction.
Mr. Rusnell, I have a question from the audience for you. It sounds like from a militia sympathizer. I am a third-generation Californian who was raised to be honest and love this country. I now fear and mistrust my government more than any militia movement.